I've got some tea for you. Hello world. You can't see my hands. Hello world. How is everyone doing today? How are you? It's reading week / whatever. I don't remember high school times anymore. I'm sorry. That was all a blur. That was 4 years ago now. Oh my god, I'm old. Today, we're just going to jump right into our topic because it's a topic that ain't going anywhere anytime soon, and that topic is COVID and the coronavirus's impacts on the environment. A few months back, I released a podcast episode talking about the environmental implications of COVID-19, and so I was looking at potentially positive outcomes of the coronavirus on the environment, as well as the negative outcomes. And I wanted to talk about this again today because we are getting more information about how COVID is impacting the environment and how it's impacting all the systems that are connected to the environment. And, it's just been a longer time frame, so we are seeing some differences, and it's just a topic that's still really relevant, which none of us thought it was going to be, and yet here we are. So today I'm going to talk about 4 different implications that COVID-19 has had on the environment. You could consider them as positive or you could consider them as negative. I don't necessarily want to paint them one way or the other. I did get some feedback regarding the podcast episode and the way that I framed it. I did originally have it titled as "Is COVID-19 Good for the Environment?" And I recognize that some people interpreted that as something unrelated to the environment. By no means am I saying that, I'm just going to say, by no means was I trying to say that population control is good for the environment and that COVID should be praised for that. That is not what that episode was about at all, and for those individuals who were concerned about that, had not listened to the episode when they made those claims, and so afterwards they realized that that was not at all what I was trying to do. So again, I'm just going to put that disclaimer out there now because I didn't even think that people would interpret it that way, but just to make sure that we're all on the same basis with that, that is not at all what this is supposed to be discussing. And so really we are just going to be focusing on the environmental impacts of it. One of the most common impacts that people have been talking about are the impacts on emissions and how emissions have greatly reduced since COVID-19 began. Now, this is due to air travel being reduced. People aren't going on vacations anymore. People aren't really commuting to work. People aren't buying as much at the time online because entire companies were just delayed and shut down, and so things could not come out as quickly as they once did. And obviously that's changed now. We have been going back to work. People have been starting to travel again to some capacity. But the main argument was that emissions have gone down significantly. There are maps that have been put out. I believe NASA might have put out a map, and if there is a map by NASA, I will link it in the description. But this map is showing how the ozone and how the atmosphere is changing as a result. And so this is a significant change because, as you might be aware, greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, methane, those type of things contribute to global warming. And global warming is simply a process like a greenhouse where you are trapping gases in our atmosphere, and these gases allow solar energy, so energy from the sun, to pass through them and pass through the atmosphere to the ground. And typically what happens is the ground will bounce back some of that energy back into the atmosphere, but some of that energy also gets captured in the atmosphere. And when that happens, it just kind of circulates around our planet and within the atmosphere, and it causes warming because there's extra energy now in our bubble, if you will. Wow, that's ironic. With greenhouse gases, they're almost acting like a thicker layer on our atmosphere, allowing energy to pass through, but not allowing it to escape out. So more and more of that solar energy is being captured in our atmosphere and cannot escape, and so we are seeing faster warming. And so faster warming can contribute to things like rapid ice melting in the polar regions. We see ocean acidification, which means things like coral and shellfish, whose shells are made of calcium, they start to break down because carbon dioxide from the atmosphere gets into the water and it makes the pH of the water more acidic, and so that's kind of what's causing the shells to break down. But messing with the pH of any environmental system can create a lot of impact and severely negatively impact certain species if they are very sensitive to things like pH. That is one impact people have been arguing it's getting better, but my main critique of it is the long-term concerns, because the fact is when COVID is over, people are still going to want to travel, people will still be going to work, they might be working from home more, yes, but for the large part, I think people will be going back to work. And as of right now, one of the few things you can do is stay at home or go for drives somewhere. And so people will still continue to drive. Cars are not going anywhere anytime soon. And so the long-term benefit of these emission reductions that we've been seeing isn't really that significant, I would say. I would say that we are going to be seeing them rise again, even though we already have, especially as we're getting close to Christmas, because people are still going to be traveling. People are going to be buying a lot of things off of a lot of websites, so that's going to create a lot of emissions. But the main positive thing that I would say from this is that oh my god, oopsies. The main positive thing that comes out of this is that we can make rapid change, and we have been. And we have goals as an entire planet to reduce our emissions under the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and other similar targets to reduce our emissions by a certain time. And this just shows that we can take rapid action towards those. And if we are able to continue these efforts to reduce emissions intentionally this time, then maybe we can create significant change. But that is going to come down to nations and individuals and the practices that we take part in going forward. The second thing that we are going to talk about is waste, because we're seeing a lot of waste. And waste is coming in the form of masks. It's coming, excuse me, burped twice. Waste is coming in the form of masks, in the form of gloves, coffee cups, takeout containers, all these things that are single use that we need for safety reasons. We are seeing them end up in landfills. We are seeing them be littered, which will end up in our waterways, which could end up in the esophagus of some poor animal. We're creating a lot of waste is what I'm trying to say. And by no means am I saying that we shouldn't be taking diligent actions to be sanitary and to be safe. Not what I'm saying. Oh my gosh, there's a train of little children outside and they're on a rope, like the little stake. It's so cute. Sorry. By no means am I saying that we shouldn't be practicing safety and sanitation, but what I am just trying to make you aware of is the amount of waste that we have been creating. And so on top of other types of waste we're already accustomed to, we are seeing new forms of waste return or more amounts of that waste return. So like before, we would have been able to bring our reusable coffee cups to the stores. Most places won't let us do that still. We used to be able to bring our reusable bags to stores. Most places still won't let you do that. We are just creating a lot of waste with everything that's going on, and there are ways that we can cut down that type of waste that we are creating. There are ways that we can cut down our waste and still be safe. So, for instance, instead of buying a bunch of single-use masks, just buy a few reusable masks and wear them and cycle them and make sure you wash them. Do that instead of using single-use ones. Or you can use your backpacks or your bags or things like that at the store. You just might not be able to bring them in. So if you're only getting a few things, don't get a bag. Just hold on to them and then put them in the bag when you get out of the store. If you are worried about the waste that you're creating from coffee, try making your coffee at home. And I know that's not necessarily the same as going out to the store, but if you are really concerned about the waste, just cut down on that and see what sustainable options are available in your area. So I've been really thankful that Zero Waste Bulk has opened up here again in Waterloo and that we are allowed to bring our own containers. They are very strict about how clean they are. They also do have some of their own containers that people have donated so that if you don't have your own clean one, you can use one of their clean ones. But there are these little ways that we can make changes that are more sustainable right now while they're still also quite safe. The third thing that we're going to talk about is our energy use and how much energy we are using. So one argument that I've been hearing is that by not going into work, we are saving a lot of energy because we are just staying at home and we're not needing to power these huge skyscraper offices and things like that. And we're not needing to take public transit, so we're saving energy on that, and we're not taking our cars, so we're saving energy on that. We're really not saving energy if that's your argument, because we're still doing just as much, we're just doing it in a different environment. And so by that, instead of powering an office building, you are powering your home. And instead of powering one office for 10, 20, 30 people, you are powering 10, 20, 30 individual homes. And that's probably going to take a lot more energy to power up than it would take to power that one building. And from an efficiency perspective, it's clearly less efficient to be running individual homes. And especially if you have your entire household at home, that's a lot of people using a lot of rooms, using a lot of electricity, a lot of water, a lot of internet. The electricity and the internet do have environmental impacts, and I have written a blog post about the environmental impacts or virtual emissions that come from the internet and come from electricity, and I will link that in the description as well. But what I'm trying to say is that it's not more energy efficient right now. Arguably, it might be less energy efficient just because we are now shifting from a communal space where we need to be using energy once to power us to everybody's on a different system. Everybody is using different lights, different internet systems, like just a lot of energy, a lot of use. In regards to things like public transit running less, public transit isn't running all that much less. There's just less people taking public transit. And so think about it. You went from having a bus running at noon, let's say, that had 20 people or so on that bus, getting them to work, to running that same bus at noon with only 1 or 2 people on it, if that. The bus might be empty. And so you're using gas, you're using electricity, you're using energy to run that bus, but it's achieving less results, or it's creating less of a positive influence and more of a negative influence just because there's no one taking it anymore. So the argument that we are saving energy is not very valid. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about is more from a social perspective. Sustainability in general encompasses more than just the environment. It's also considering the social, the economic, the political, and the cultural sustainability that is a part of the world that we live in. And one of the major impacts that we are seeing right now is the failing of small businesses. And so especially here in Waterloo, a lot of small businesses like bars, restaurants have unfortunately had to shut down. They've not been able to pay for rent because rent is crazy high. They're not making the same profit, especially with the extra safety precautions that they have to be taking. That's why for a while, I don't know if they're still doing it because I don't really eat out all that much, but for a while there were restaurants that were charging a COVID tax because they had to take extra precautions during their process, and that is cost on them. If you have to keep buying extra gloves or buying masks or buying extra sanitation products, whatever it may be, that's an extra cost on the business, and so it's really hard for them. And the fact that things like, let's say, zero waste bulk, a store that is so grounded on the concept of zero waste, would not be able to run during a pandemic because no one is allowed to be using reusable products. Imagine how devastating it can be on a business like that, and it's so great that they have recovered and that they are still open because they are really significant to the sustainability actions going on in our local community. But other businesses have not been as fortunate just because it has been such a devastating impact on their ability to stay open because they can't make profits. And so it's important to be considering that when you're thinking about sustainability, because again, sustainability is about more than just the environment, more than just about the trees and the nature that you see outside your window. It's also about the people that you see and you interact with and the places that you go. So those are four things that that's not even four. Those are four things that I just wanted to shed light on in regards to COVID and the environment and sustainability that you might not have been aware of or you might not have considered yet at this point in the pandemic. And there's so much more that could be said, but I just wanted to touch on some of the most common things that I've been hearing and seeing myself. And if you want to learn more, you could definitely go listen to the podcast, which again, I will link below. All this to say, COVID sucks. Like, sure, emissions might have gone down, and it might have proven to us that we can make a difference if we take action collectively and if we feel that we are pressured enough to do so. But there are so many aspects to this pandemic to consider that you might not have realized were even connected to the pandemic at all. But it just really shows how interconnected our systems are and how our actions really do make a difference on everything and everyone around us. So I don't want this to be all doom and gloom. There are ways that you can be sustainable during the pandemic, which I have written about in blog posts and podcasts, and I will link those again in the description. So if you want to learn how you can be more sustainable right now while also practicing safe sanitation and distancing measures, check that out. That is all for today, and I hope you have an amazing day. I hope you are staying safe and staying well. This is Jenna signing off. Until next time.